the foundation stone of Western literature, a story of gods and heroes, of love and war. The story begins not with armies, but with a single face, a beauty that would launch 1,000 ships. The abduction of Helen by Paris sparks a terrible vow and a call to arms across all of Greece. An immense armada, 1,000 ships, gathers to sail east and bring her back. Their target, the magnificent city of Troy, protected by its mighty, god-built walls. For 10 long years, the Greeks lay siege to the city, but its walls could not be breached. The war became a clash of legendary heroes. For the Greeks, the near-invincible Achilles, and for the Trojans, their noble prince and protector, the mighty Hector. The epic tells of their final fateful duel before the city walls, a battle of the two greatest champions. But even with Hector's fall, the city did not yield. The war could not be won by strength alone. It would be won by cunning, an idea from the cleverest of the Greeks, Odysseus. A plan to build a great wooden horse, a supposed offering to the gods, and leave it on the beach. The Greeks would then pretend to give up, to sail away, leaving the horse behind as their final tribute. The Trojans, celebrating their victory, dragged the great horse into their city as a trophy. But hidden inside its hollow belly were the best of the Greek warriors, waiting for the city to sleep. That night, as the city slept, they emerged and sealed Troy's fate. They opened the gates to the waiting Greek army, and the final, terrible sack of the city began. The great city of Troy was burned to the ground, its people lost, its treasures looted. The golden echo of the myth has resounded through 3,000 years of art and literature. It is the ultimate story of a great war, of heroism, of tragedy, and of cunning. For centuries, this was all Troy was, a magnificent story, a poet's dream. Most scholars of the 18th and 19th centuries believed it was nothing more. A beautiful invention from the dawn of time, but a place you can never find on a map. But one man, a German businessman, refused to believe it was only a story. His name was Heinrich Schliemann, and he believed, with an almost religious fervor, that Homer was not a poet, but a historian. He made a fortune in business with a single goal in mind: to earn enough money to fund his search for Troy. He used Homer's epic not as a poem, but as a literal guidebook, a treasure map. Dismissing the consensus of scholars, his calculations led him to a single, unremarkable hill in western Turkey, a place called Hisarlik. While others saw only a mound of earth, Schliemann saw the buried citadel of King Priam. In 1871, armed with his fortune and his unshakable faith in Homer, he hired 100 men and began to dig. Schliemann's methods were brutal. He was not a patient archaeologist, but a treasure hunter in a hurry. He believed Homer's Troy must be at the very bottom, on the bedrock. Everything else was just dirt to be cleared away. What he didn't realize was that a city is not one place, but many, built one on top of the other over centuries. In his haste to find Homer's city, he was destroying the very evidence he was looking for. After 3 years of digging, he had found walls, gates, and the foundations of a city far older than he imagined. This city, Troy too, showed clear signs of a massive fiery destruction. For Schliemann, this was proof. Then, in May 1873, near the Great Gate, he saw something glinting in the dirt. He dismissed his workers for the day, claiming it was a public holiday. Then, in secret, with only his young wife Sophia, he began to excavate the spot himself. what they found was beyond his wildest dreams. A treasure trove from the age of heroes. Thousands of objects, rings, bracelets, and goblets of pure, solid gold. And most famously, a magnificent golden diadem and jewelry. Schliemann was convinced he had not just found Troy, he had found the treasure of its last king, Priam. In a now famous and controversial act, he adorned his wife Sophia in the jewelry. He had found, he declared to the world, the jewels of Helen. The news of the discovery exploded across the world. It was the greatest archaeological find in history. Schliemann, the amateur, the dreamer, had become the most famous archaeologist in the world. But his triumph was built on a series of deceptions. He had smuggled the treasure out of Turkey, breaking his agreement with the Ottoman government. And as other, more careful archaeologists examined his findings, a terrible truth began to emerge. The city he had found, the burnt city of Troy, too, was from the early Bronze Age. It was 1,000 years too old to be the city of Homer. The treasure he had found was real, but it was not Priam's. His jewels of Helen had belonged to a forgotten queen, a millennium before Helen was ever born. Schliemann, in his obsessive quest to prove Homer right, had found the wrong Troy. The question then remained, if this was not Homer's city, was the real Troy still buried in the hill? The work was taken up by others, who painstakingly unpicked the damage Schliemann had done. They analyzed the different layers and found a candidate for the age of the Trojan War, the city known as Troy 6. This city was far grander than Schliemann's Troy. It had magnificent sloping walls and great watchtowers. Its pottery and its architecture showed it was a powerful, wealthy city with strong connections to the Mycenaean Greeks. But this city, Troy 6, was not destroyed by war. The evidence was clear. It was destroyed by a massive earthquake. The walls had not been breached by an army. They had been shaken apart by the earth itself. So the search moved to the next layer up, Troy 7A, a poorer, more crowded city, built on the ruins of the Great One. And here in this final desperate layer of Bronze Age Troy, archaeologists found the evidence they were looking for. Not a natural disaster, but a human one. Unburied bodies in the streets, piles of sling stones ready for a last defense, and everywhere, the thick, black layer of a final, catastrophic fire. This was it, a real city in the right place from the right time, destroyed in a manner that perfectly matched the legend. So was the Trojan War real? The answer is almost certainly yes, there was a war. But was it the war of the poets? Was it fought by Achilles and Hector? Was it fought over a beautiful queen? Or was it, perhaps, a brutal trade war for control of the Dardanelles? And what of the Trojan Horse? No archaeological evidence for it has ever been found. Some scholars suggest the horse was a poetic memory of a new weapon, a great timber-framed battering ram. Or perhaps it was a metaphor for an earthquake sent by the god Poseidon, the earth shaker, who was also the god of horses. We will never know for certain. The Trojan horse remains in the realm of the poet, a mystery the spade cannot solve. So the city is real. The war was real. But what of the treasure Schliemann found? After Schliemann's death, it was displayed in Berlin, but its journey was far from over. During the final, desperate battle for Berlin in 1945, the treasure vanished. For nearly 50 years, the world believed it had been lost or melted down, another casualty of war. Then, after the fall of the Soviet Union, a stunning announcement was made from Moscow. The treasure had not been destroyed. It had been kept secret in a vault for half a century. A Bronze Age treasure discovered by a German, smuggled from Turkey and seized by the Russians. Today, it remains in Moscow, a beautiful prize with a complex and controversial history. Schliemann himself remains a deeply controversial figure in archaeology. A vandal who destroyed priceless evidence, or a visionary who revealed a lost world? The truth is, he was both. Without his obsession, Troy might never have been found. But without his recklessness, we would know so much more about the city he uncovered. Today, the site of Troy is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, protected and studied with scientific care. And the story it tells is more complex and more interesting than the one Homer sang. It is the story of a survivor, a city that was destroyed and rebuilt time and time again, a vital crossroads between East and West, a prize for kings, and a home for ordinary people for 4,000 years. So, was the Trojan War real? Yes, the spade has proven it. But did the War of Homer happen? No. That war happened only in the golden echo of a poet's mind. And in the end, it is the poet's dream, not the archaeologist's reality, that has proven the most powerful. Schliemann may have found the wrong city and the wrong treasure, but his obsession proved one thing. It proved that some myths are not just stories. They are the long, distorted shadows of real events. And that sometimes you must believe in a golden echo just to find the spade's shadow. The city of Homer lives forever in the pages of his epic, a monument of words. The city of history lives on in the silent testimony of its stones. One, a story of gods and perfect heroes. The other, a story of survivors and the earth. Both stories are true. Both stories are necessary. One tells us who we dream of being. The other tells us who we really are. And the search for Troy teaches us that sometimes the greatest treasure is not the gold we find. It is the truth that the gold leads us to. Today, the name Troy resonates far beyond the shores of Turkey. It has become a universal symbol, a symbol of a deceptive gift, a fatal vulnerability, a warning to never let your guard down. The story of Achilles gives us the archetype of the great but flawed warrior and the concept of a single fatal weakness. And the story of Helen reminds us that the spark of great conflict can come from the most personal and human of places. These are the gifts of the poet. They take the messy, brutal facts of history and turn them into timeless human stories. Schliemann's mistake was that he tried to excavate the tapestry, not the threads it was made from. Modern archaeology, in contrast, seeks to understand both the real threads of history and the beautiful tapestry of myth that was woven from them. It is a story with no final answer, a place where the spade's shadow and the golden echo will dance forever. The city of Homer lives forever in the pages of his epic, a monument of words. The city of history lives on in the silent testimony of its stones. One, a story of gods and perfect heroes. The other, a story of survivors and the earth. Both stories are true. Both stories are necessary. One tells us who we dream of being. The other tells us who we really are. And the search for Troy teaches us that sometimes the greatest treasure is not the gold we find. It is the truth that the gold leads us to. The story of Troy is not a simple choice between myth and history. It is the story of how history becomes myth, and how myth can lead us back to history. A cycle of forgetting and rediscovery that is, itself, a kind of epic. A story that teaches us that our past is never truly lost, as long as we have the courage to search for it. And the passion to listen for its golden echoes, even in the deepest of the spade's shadows.